All right, good evening. I call this meeting of Magnolia Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Opens Meetings Act, Texas Government Code 5, Chapter 551. So if everybody will please stand, Ms. Sonia Ebel is going to lead us in our invocation and pledges.
Thank you. It's been our long-standing tradition to pray before our meetings. If you choose to, please bow your heads and pray with me. Father God, please thank you for this wonderful community that loves their children so much. As we are scattered about this summer on summer break, please protect our children, our teachers, and staff as they travel over the summer and keep them safe until they return home. And school is just around the corner, will be starting. Please place a hedge of protection around our constables as they protect our staff. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
If you could join us for the U.S. pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag.
All right, thank you. We've got such a huge crowd tonight, and there's no recognitions. Where are all the students? Is there anybody? I just said, where are all the students? There's no recognitions. Where are they? Do we have anybody signed up to speak? No, sir. Thank you. Okay, the man is coming into position here. Dr. Morris.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Blizzard. And good evening. So tonight, where's Mike? Thank you. Tonight we want to give you guys a budget update. There's not much to update since we met in May under current law, but also wanted to go into some detail about, what a tax ratification election might look like so we can get some direction on that. As a reminder of the challenging setting that we're in, as a second year of this biennium, the state of Texas did not afford us any additional dollars this year. We know that they've not increased the basic allotment since 2019. I've told you all this time and time again. But we are in a better position than most because of the difficult decisions we made this past year to freeze salaries and to develop a plan for the stimulus money funding cliff. Okay, so as a reminder, we will be proposing under current law a balanced budget for 24-25 that includes, let me see if I can get this going. Okay, there we go. That includes an increase in salaries for individuals of a minimum of 1%. And I need to go back. I'm sorry, guys, it skipped one. This thing is sensitive tonight. Okay. Just as a reminder, we were able to update our compensation plan where we gave a 1% raise for all employees under current law. And then given the pay gap that we know that exists for our teachers in particular with the greater years of experience, we decided that we were going to be very intentional regardless of the amount of money that we had available in terms of focusing additional dollars for our veteran teachers. So just as a reminder, 1.5%, 2%, 3%. And obviously we had to add some staff for the anticipated student enrollment growth and opening Audubon Elementary. Okay. We also talked about a minimum one-time retention payment on September 15th of $500. Okay. So again, I just wanted to remind you all of and I know it's very simple. There's not a lot of additional money coming our way, so there's not a lot of decisions to make, but that's where we are under current law. Okay. Any questions about that? Obviously, there's a lot of districts that, are going through, greater pains than us to try to balance budgets or to limit deficits. In terms of cutting staff, we've read the headlines of cutting librarians in some locations. Read an article a few days ago that said of all the districts in the Austin area, there were a total of, I think, either 3 or 4 that had balanced budgets, and 3 of those 4 had to cut staff just to balance the budgets. So it's not something that any district is immune to. It's challenging when you have the inflation that we've seen and the Medicaid cuts, and then just the absence of additional funding from the state for now 5 years in a row. But that's sort of where we are in school funding. Did you have a question, Jay?
Just for the record, you noted that we have no increase in our basic allotment in the last 5 years, yet we're able to still somehow find 1% to 3% for our staff. Where are we getting those dollars?
Primarily, it's driven by anticipated student enrollment growth. We believe that we've been very conservative with that number. The comptroller, or excuse me, the demographer is projecting just shy of 500 student enrollment growth. And for budget building purposes, we're anticipating 325 increase, which gives us some cushion. So with additional students, obviously, there's additional dollar on a per student basis. There's obviously costs associated with educating that student, but it does provide enough. And I'll remind you that, in doing this relatively small amount, in particular, of the non-teaching staff of 1%, and given how many teachers we have at 0 to 15 years of experience, it doesn't cost a lot of money to do what we've recommended here. It's a little over $1 million. And so, but that is driven, Jay, by additional students.
So we have additional students, but it sounds like square peg, round hole to get more money from the same box. We're really maybe increasing classroom size by a student head count or 2. Is that more or less?
At some point, I mean, if the state fails to come through this next biennium, those are discussions that will have to be made. Yes, sir. At some point, in lieu of a tax ratification election or additional dollars from the state, something has to give at some point. Yes, sir. In particular, 2 years down the road when we're, opening up 2 schools at the same time, where you're adding a substantial amount of operating costs. Now, we can do some things to limit the effects on the budget when we're opening those, but yes, sir. I mean, at some point, they're going to have to increase the funding.
But to give our teachers a real raise, a raise that would be in line with inflation over the last 5 years, which is something probably in excess of 25 to 30%, we would actually have to go out to the voters and get a tax increase.
We would have to do something drastic if we didn't go to the voters. Yes, sir. I mean, it would take a reduction in force, increased class size, cuts in services and programs and things of that nature. And obviously, we know, what means the most to our parents. They come here for small class sizes. I mean, that's something that drives our folks, and that's something that, that traditionally, we've been able to get around as the state eventually comes through with additional dollars. And unfortunately, it just feels like a different environment now. So yes, to your point, I think that we've been backed into a corner where a tax ratification election is our only means to generate enough money to close any substantial gap.
Yeah, and just my comment on the record, that I think that without the legislature passing some sort of, like they held us hostage last year for vouchers, obviously I sit on a public school board, I'm not necessarily a proponent of vouchers, but without that hostage situation going away, it does not feel like the state's going to give public schools any more money.
Yes, sir. We talk a lot amongst our peers, and there's no indication of positive movement for public education for this next session. That's next January. The governor and lieutenant governor have already come out with their points of interest, and there's no mention of additional school funding or teacher pay or anything along those lines. Now, there's some uncertainty about the votes in place to get the voucher consideration passed. And then there's a question of, is it a good thing if it passes or is it not for public school funding purposes? Because, we don't know, how exactly that will affect us if they have the votes. So, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So from that end, let's talk about we'll call these different things. It used to be known as a TRE, now it's a VATRE or VATER. We will refer to it as a school referendum often as well. And again, we've already touched on this, but why would a district propose a school referendum? I mean, we know the situation that we're in because of the absence of funding from the state. It is the only mechanism to force the state to send us more money. Okay? So we not only benefit locally by an increase in local revenue, but it forces the state to pay us more money. And I'll show you some dollar amounts in just a moment. Obviously, we felt this in our own back pockets at home with the inflation, the increase in fuel costs, utilities, insurance costs, and then we get into retaining and recruiting quality staff. We know we're behind in pay. We know that we gave no raises in 23-24 and very minimal raises in 24-25. We also, a few years ago, if the board recalls, were one of the first ones that stepped out there and decided that we were going to put a constable at every campus, where we put a constable at every elementary campus before most districts did. And when we made that move, it doubled the safety budget. So it cost us approximately another $900,000, or a little over 800, to make that a reality. And at that time, there were no additional funds to do that. And so when you do something like that and you're not getting increases in the basic allotment, you're pulling money from the classroom. And so, having a TRE would allow us to generate some funds to help properly fund that. They changed the allotment, the safety allotment, this past go-around, where it was just under $10 a child, a student, $9.95 to be exact, and now it's $15,000 per campus, which is not a lot of money. I mean, we generate $225,000 in school safety money from the state of Texas for something that's nearly a $2 million budget. Now, the good news is, with the mandates of this past go-around, there are a lot of districts, Bryan ISD is one of them, who are scrambling to try to find the funds now to have a constable or a SRO at every campus, because they didn't do what we did years ago. And they're in the same position we're in with the inflation and things of that nature, and really no additional money to fill that gap. So we're in a good position because of the decisions we made. It's just anytime we do something like that and where operational expenses increase, it just means that we're unable to do more for the classroom. Did you have something, Dr. Bullard?
Yeah, Dr. Morse, you had said that a VATER would be one of the mechanisms we could have to force the state to send us more dollars. Explain for a minute how that would work. Say a 3-penny increase would actually mean the state would have to contribute more dollars.
Absolutely, and I'll jump to that slide, and then we'll go back one. So, well, I tell you what, let me go back to this one because I think it'll make more sense. So there's 3 different components of the M&O tax rate. There's the compressed M&O tax rate, and that's set by law. It's set by a calculation that's based on state estimates for overall property value increases across the state and local property value increase. So ultimately, that's going to be set for us. Now, unfortunately, it's not going down substantially this next year, primarily because the estimate from the comptroller was so low for state average. So that tier 1 is set for us, okay? It's tier 2 and tier 3, the golden pennies and the copper pennies, that we have flexibility with. So we generate currently 5 golden pennies, and those pennies, they're called golden pennies for a reason. They generate more state aid than any other penny. And ultimately, it's designed to motivate school districts to have a TRE. That's why they're worth so much money. It motivates districts to tax higher, okay? So right now, we can access 5 of those, and we do, via board approval. There's 3 more golden pennies that we can access with voter approval, with a TRE, okay? Now, the 9 copper pennies are eligible for us to go after as well. Unfortunately, we are subject to recapture at that level, and this will come up in the regular meeting as well, so please keep that in mind. And I'll show you what that looks like on this next slide. So the top of the page, this is what our current revenue for 24-25 looks like. You see the property tax revenue and the state aid. Total amount of money, $127.3 million. Were we to go out for a 3-penny TRE, you see that we would generate an extra $7.3 million, of which none of it's subject to recapture, and it's almost exactly cut down the middle, where the state is, their hand would be forced to actually pay us slightly more than what we generate locally. You see the 3.6 million and the 3.7 million. Okay? So I ran a scenario of 4 pennies just to show you even that first penny, that first copper penny is subject to recapture. So you can see as you go down the state aid column, this is why the golden pennies are worth so much. I mean, even if we went up 10 pennies on scenario C, the state aid has virtually not changed at all. And we would be subject to recapture of almost $1.7 million, which means we would be going to our voters for approval and then having to send some of our local tax dollars back to the state of Texas, which is not a good approach. Which is why if we were to go out, we would recommend going out for 3 pennies. Ultimately, we're maximizing our state aid with a limited effect on the tax rate. Any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify, you're talking specifically about if we go out for 3 of the golden pennies.
Yes, ma'am.
And that could generate a little over $7 million. But if we increased the copper pennies, then we're back to, and a lot of us probably remember the old Robin Hood plans. So if we were to obtain more, we actually have to, in that category, have to give more back to the state.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's why the focus is really on the golden pennies.
It is, yes, ma'am. It's been called different things over the past 30 years, but Robin Hood was the first title it had. Recapture was the second, and now they call it excess local revenue, as if we would really have excess local revenue, but that's what it's called. So, yes, ma'am.
So just for clarification on reading this slide, if you look at the very bottom line in, I guess, orange or tan there, you have 12 million and change, and then you have 3.7 million and change, which would be 15.8 million, but we would only get out of that 15.8, we'd only get 14.1,
That's
right?
correct. That's
Because the
correct.
state is recapturing 1.7
We-
roughly, yeah, and so.
Yes, sir. I wanted to keep the
Okay.
columns separate, just to separate, but ultimately it would be reducing the 3.7 million by 1.7 million.
And so all the recapture, so just looking at the recapture number, in the first 3-penny model, there's no recapture, so all of our tax money stays in Magnolia. In the second one, that when we give that 4th penny, 240,000 of that goes back to the state, and then in the third model there, 1.7 million goes back to the state roughly.
That's correct. Yep.
So that's, I mean, I think that's an excellent example, for the layperson to understand, like, here's how, if we do a tax increase, 3 cents, 4 cents, 10 cents, what stays local and what goes local. Now, even at that, as we look at these numbers, in the bottom scenario, and I'm not necessarily advocating for one of these, although I think the 3-penny scenario definitely makes a ton of sense. As we look at the bottom scenario, where we would have an increase in 14.1 million in revenue to the school district, the state just kicks in the same amount, right? So the state's giving money, basically at 3.7, something just around 3.7 up to 3.75 million to us.
Yes, sir. That's
And
correct.
their money comes from other recapture or from general fund tax? Where does it come?
Yeah, it's
The
just-
toll
it's
roads that
part
we're
of their-
supposed to help
yes,
pay
sir,
for
it's part of their
schools?
general
Do we?
budget. From sales tax. And
Lottery
things of that
tax?
nature.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
yeah. We just don't get a
But-
bigger share of that.
But
just
no,
'cause-
that, yes, sir, that's accurate. I mean, so ultimately, with the 3 pennies, we're already maximizing state aid. And
We're
not-
maximizing state aid, but by increasing beyond 3 pennies, we get to keep most of that ourselves.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, the district administration cabinet, we've sort of sat down, started thinking, what sort of creative compensation plan could we develop, to focus on the issues, which are primarily the difference in teacher pay and things of that nature. And so the plan, which could be done or would be done, I mean, it's just one of the options. We had approximately $7.4 million. We could take approximately $5.2 million of that and give a minimum raise to all employees of 4%. And then we could do, as we did with a limited amount of money, and structure higher raises for our veteran teachers to close that gap. And I'm going to show you here in a minute exactly what that looks like, okay? Probably the thing that I'm most excited about that we have worked on as a team is we've created what we believe to be something extremely unique and creative in terms of a MISD loyalty pay system. And I'll go into that in just a moment. But the focus or intent being that we reward our folks for not just coming here, but sticking around. And I think you're gonna like it here in just a moment, okay? And then we would set aside approximately $1 million for staffing for new facilities. Okay, and again, this is just an option. This is not something that we're asking for approval. It's just something that we think is creative that would be putting the dollars where they need to go. So this is our teacher loyalty pay system that we've generated, okay? What you'll notice is the first column is the number of teachers at each level of experience based on how we've separated those. You see 0 to 2 years in MISD, 3 to 5 years, 6 to 10, and so forth. Second column is a number of hourly employees at those different levels. So obviously the first thing that jumps out is the number of teachers that we have between 0 and 2 years of experience in MISD and up to 5 years. You can see how many of those, 414 plus 192, of the total of 852. Okay? So what we developed here, and this was with multiple intents, we're trying to get some money in the hands of our employees for their loyalty to Magnolia ISD, and also trying to protect the district in terms of limiting recurring cost. Okay? So in this scenario, what we've done is you can see everything that's highlighted in blue. We would anticipate coming to those employees who have earned it based on their years of experience, incrementally increasing as their numbers of years in MISD do. Those would come in the form, of one-time payments, not to be assumed in future years, okay? We would hope that we could maintain it, but not to be assumed. So you can see all of those in the peach colored. We sort of thought to ourselves, if we want to keep our folks around, let's start at 11 years of experience and let's make it TRS eligible. Well, they will want to stick around and it'll reward them for the rest of their lives. Okay? So in this scenario, you see that starting at $2,500 with 11 to 15, 3,000, 16 to 20, and so forth and so on. Okay? And obviously for our hourly folks, guys, the folks who have been here and have been loyal to us for year upon year, I mean, you start talking about $1,500 at 21 years of experience. That's a lot of money for those folks.
So Eric, after how many years is a teacher eligible for retirement?
It's the rule of 80, Jay, is what it is, and there's different tiers depending
Yeah.
on when you're hired. I think one of the newest ones, you can't do it until 60 but
enough.
generally speaking, it's a rule of 80, so it's years of experience plus your age.
Okay, so I think this is a fascinating and productive model. I'd love to see it as an amortization schedule out 20
Sure,
years to
sure.
see
Okay.
how these things add up over time, right? Because once we put somebody in that orange bucket and they reach retirement, that never rolls off until their
Gotcha.
death, right? So,
Yeah, and we can certainly do that and show, like average age of retirement and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. And then finally, guys, so if you see at the bottom, we had sort of earmarked $1.2 million for this. And in this scenario, we're only committing about $320,000 to recurring cost because of the relative few number of employees or teachers that we have in district with 11 or more years of experience in MISD. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so there's a lot going on this side, but bear with me. So we show a comparison at different levels of teaching experience with how we compare to Conroe ISD, Montgomery ISD, and Tomball, and I created a peer average. And this is ugly, but that's why we're creating what we are creating. So you'll see in the yellow how we currently compare at those different levels with the peer average of those three districts for teacher pay. Now, obviously, not giving a raise this past year and protecting the district in doing so when others gave, around 3%, 2 or 3, this is greatly inflated since the previous year, about $2,000 on average, but it is accurate, okay? So if you look at the middle of the page, this will be how we compare with those three district average under current law for what you guys have already approved for compensation plan. So you can see, if you look down there at the 30-year, 25-year experience, doing the 2 and 3% raise, being intentional with that, is closing that gap. You'll see that we went from 6,300 to 4,700 in 1 year. Okay, so the approach works. Okay, but if you look at the bottom of the page, this would be the end product of how we would compare with those districts if the VATRE passed and if we did exactly what we talked about doing on the previous page, okay? Where we would do the raises. You'll see there 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%. And then I've added in the teacher loyalty bonus for MISD experience. So you'll see in the peach colored or pinkish colored there at the bottom center of the page, on updated pay alone without the loyalty bonus, that's how much we will have closed the gap. Okay? Does that make sense, guys? And even if you just look at the average, right now the average disparity is $4,400. $4,400. The average disparity next year will be $3,900. And if we did what we're talking about with the raises, it would only be $400 difference. Okay? Now, as you move to the right, if you take into consideration at year 11 plus, for those who have been loyal to MISD and have stuck around, you add in that teacher loyalty bonus, you can see that as of 11 years of experience, we're $1,500 more than the other districts. On the far right, you'll see in green there, where a 30-year teacher who has been here for all those years gets that raise, gets their $5,000, and now is making $4,600 more than the average of those three districts. Does that make sense, guys? I know there's a lot going on, so bear with me. All to say that we believe what we've developed, closes the teacher pay gap, And it also creates a unique system that we are unaware of any other district having anything quite like it, the loyalty pay system. Okay? So, and this just sort of proves the point, guys, that you already know. I mean, we're losing some teachers as they get close to 8 to 10 years of experience because of the teacher pay gap. You know, you see here we're in the blue. State average is the dark red. So our teacher turnover this past year was around 23%, which is right at state average. Now, what does the average teacher who is exiting the district look like? And you can see it right here. Average years of experience, 8.64. So going back to that teacher pay gap, I mean, it is causing us to lose the veteran teachers. Right when many of them are hitting their prime. So let's talk about tax rate just briefly of what it would look like, and we can compare it to the historical stuff. We talked about 3 pennies because we have 3 golden pennies that are not subject to recapture. Right now, the total tax rate is 96 cents. If there's no VATRE, or if there is one and it doesn't pass, the total tax rate would be 95.95. If we have a VATRE and it passes, it would be 98 cents. Okay? So what is the 3 penny effect on the average value, taxable value of a home? So according to Montgomery County, the average taxable value with the increase in the homestead exemption to $100,000, keep that in mind, $295,000 times 3 pennies is $88 a year, or $7.40 a month. Half a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Any questions on that? So this is what it looks like, guys, as a whole. Obviously, we know with tax rate compression over the past many years and the rapidly growing property values that we've had, we have one of the lowest tax rates in Montgomery County and in the entire area. And so, you know, I mean, obviously it's the lowest it's been in 30 plus years. You'd have to look back. I don't even know how far you would have to go. So we're at 96 cents now, and we would be at 98 if it passed. You can see how that compares to previous years. Question on that? Okay. So VATRE timeline, the 2 biggest deadlines is if we choose to call an election, it has to be called by August 19th. And then the election has to be held on the general election day in November. There is an efficiency audit that's required. We've already, and we talked about this in May, we've secured our external auditors to perform that, and they are gathering information as we speak. And I think it'll be helpful information once it comes out. Quickly, Ms. Myers and her folks wanted to get some community feedback through the Thought Exchange module that we have. And so sent some information out to our district stakeholders, parents, and so forth. There were 1,392 participants, total of 1,015 thoughts and 33,000 ratings, which is some pretty good turnaround. And so you'll see here, and I won't go through all of these, but you're going to see a theme that's not surprising of the, you know, biggest number of topics that have been discussed of what's most important to our district stakeholders. It's quality teaching. It's paying our teachers more. It's closing teacher pay gaps, and so forth and so on. And it goes into a lot more detail about class sizes, student-to-teacher ratios, and things of that nature. Here's a different view where it just goes by word, keyword themes. Retention, you know, student-to-teacher ratio, that's where ratio comes from. Class sizes is extremely important. And again, we know these things, but it's good to see it via the feedback from our parents. we asked a question about, how we have the lowest tax rate. If we were to go out for a TRE and it increased by 3 pennies, which equates to $7.40 a month, how would you vote? 50% said yes, 14% said no, and 29% were unsure. And then Ms. Myers' folks sent a question or some questions out to our staff about what's most important to our staff when building a budget. So without getting into a lot of specifics, I don't think it'll come as a surprise. Despite differing views on how to achieve it, all respondents agree on the importance of providing a quality education. They recognize that retaining highly qualified teachers is crucial to this goal. Some suggest that increasing teacher pay is the best way to ensure this, while others propose reallocating funds from unnecessary expenses. Okay.
Are there any examples of those?
None that add up to substantial amounts of money, no, sir. And they don't, they don't know our world, and 86% of our budget is payroll employee benefits, and so, no, sir. So, what's on deck? If the board decides to, if we decide to call an election, we would do that. Then we would set the tax rate. We would adopt 2 budgets and 2 different compensation plans. Hold the election, canvass the election, and then if we had it and if it passed, we would amend the budget accordingly. Oop, that gets into the regular agenda. So, stuffy in here, is it just me? Any questions, guys?
So when would we need to adopt 2 budgets?
Before August 31st, or by August 31st. We would anticipate doing that on August 26th. We have our regular meeting August 12th, which is before August 19th.
So we would potentially vote on a voucher on the 26th or on the next regular scheduled meeting?
On the 26th.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And at that time, we would also look at the budget?
On the 12th, if we called an election then, let me back up. Regardless, we will be voting on the proposed tax rate to go in the newspaper. It's not adopting the tax rate, it's voting to approve the rate to go in the paper. That would happen on August 12th.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I had a question for you. So if we go back to last summer, we were talking about the state had record surpluses. And I think around that time, they'd collected almost $5 billion to put into education, teachers, staff. And then they had, maybe 6 sessions?
Yes, ma'am. They had
About-
at one point $5.4 billion set aside for public ed.
And that was
they had
all-
6 special sessions. Yes, ma'am.
That was all money.
If my memory is
Yeah,
correct. Yes,
money collected from taxpayers
Yes,
that
ma'am.
was supposed to be used for education, teachers, teacher pay.
It was earmarked for public ed at one time.
Yeah.
We've had some folks look into it. I think Ms. Weatherby looked into it, and they've shifted the money to other needs. But yes,
Yeah.
it was in there, and they had a record surplus of $30 billion or whatever the number was, and had formed the committees to make recommendations on what we need in public ed, and the primary focus was teacher pay, and yes, they did nothing.
And it just poof, all $5.4 billion earmarked for
It's
education
probably
went
going
someplace
to-
else.
Probably going to roads, if I was guessing. But yes.
So of that $5.4 billion that was earmarked for education, do you recall about how much we were expecting, and this is last year, to go to MISD?
Yes, ma'am. There were several different models, but HB 100 would generate close to $10 million for us. And we've already shown you what we can do with 7.5.
So we
That's how meaningful it would have been.
could have had some, if the state
yes.
had followed through,
Yeah,
we could have had some
and that
incredible
would have been consistent for all districts.
pay
It would
increases.
have been consistent for all districts, yes, ma'am.
But that would have only been a one-time payment, right? That would not have been a recurring necessarily
Well, it
budget item.
Yeah,
Been
potentially.
2 year.
It would depend on how they treated it, Jay. If they simply, and they would never do this, But if they simply increase the basic allotment, then it's built into the basic allotment from now on, which means we would have flexibility with how we spend the money. They rarely do
But
that.
pragmatically, that wasn't really what they were considering in House HB1. They were considering a one-time payment,
That-
offset, part of that money they were looking to offset for vouchers. So there was a big battle, and that's why it
Yeah.
didn't get to us because, like I said, our Lieutenant Governor held that money hostage trying to get vouchers passed.
There definitely would have been a requirement for a certain amount of teacher pay raises, or how we would have had to spend.
How we would have had to spend
Yes,
it,
sir.
but then we would have been on the hook for trying to figure out how to maintain those raises without a tax base to support it.
It's done
So
nothing but-
even slicing that money, yes, we could have given a one-year bonus or some one-time raises, maybe to the low end to start recruiting better, but we couldn't have supported something like we're proposing now, where we can actually give our teachers some real merit raises and sustain it for the foreseeable future.
Yes, sir, and the good news is the golden pennies is sort of the gift that keeps on giving, because there's a mechanism in the Tier 2 funding component that's tied to the Austin ISD yield on a per watt basis, and every time that goes up every 2 years, you receive more Tier 2 funding. So we're only accessing 5 pennies. That's something that we would benefit from every biennium. So yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And without this, the voter-approved tax rate increase, the only way to obtain more money at this point, since the state is not funding any further, would be population increase of our students.
That's it, yes, ma'am.
Demographics.
We don't have a lot of control over that, but that's the only way to generate additional revenue in this funding system.
Okay.
It creates more revenue, but unless we have bigger classroom sizes, it does nothing to the quality of education.
100%, yes, sir.
I have a comment. Hearing you say that our own teachers agree that we need to keep quality education. Parents and the thought chair said that too. So to stay competitive, I mean, putting it to a vote in an election, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I think it's the only attempt to stay competitive. I mean, it makes complete sense. So I agree.
Well, it's the only mechanism we have to generate additional revenue and to force the state into doing something. So, yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
2 points or questions,
Okay.
clarifications. I think to not go after those 3 pennies, we'd be crazy because the state's offering it and we got to chase it. Number 2, the elephant in the room is your numbers show that we've got nearly 3/4 of our teachers with 5 years or less experience, and that number is only going to get bigger. And that is where we're headed with this plane if it keeps flying the way it is. It seems to me, if we don't do that, we can't turn it around and retain experience.
I think it's deeply concerning, yes, sir. And I know Dr. Garza could speak better to that in terms of the academic and instructional effect, but yes, I mean, it's common sense generally. Yes, sir.
Yeah, recognizing that we're not voting on this today, but also that we keep losing quality teachers to other districts. The thing that I hear echoed from those teachers, and some of them wander back just because other districts aren't as good to work in.
Yes, sir.
But it's a choice that they make at a sacrifice to their kind of quality of living. I think it's something we should consider if we do go forward with the plan. The raise plan is part of that secondary budget that would be contingent on an increase in the tax base, is that we should consider bridging service for teachers that come back under the plan that looked at their tenure. So just throw that out there.
Yes, sir. I mean, the other, I guess, benefit that we have, and I know we've talked about this, that we currently have that sets us apart is the childcare. You know, I mean, we charge next to nothing, which is extremely advantageous for much of the younger teachers who have the younger kids. And, you know, that's something we do have, but it doesn't affect everyone, of course. So, any other questions?
No, Jay, I'll just say that Dr. Morse and I were discussing just the other day some of this loyalty pay plan, and you know, should teachers who have left the district at some point and already logged a certain number of years of service with our kids wanted to come back, we had talked about applying this to them as well. I mean, you know, with the overall goal of improving the experience level and you know, what our teachers bring to the table with more years of experience under their belt. And thank you, Dr. Morris.
Yes, sir.
It's well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, now we're at our consent agenda, moving to that. This portion of the agenda consists of items that are routine, A through H, and enacted by, what? Oh. Oh, sorry. Sorry, wow. Look what I've done. This is not good. I have to buy you lunch for that, Dr. Bruner.
No, it's okay. I'll get through this quickly and we can move on to the consent agenda.
We're not in a hurry for that.
So I just want to bring you up to date on our bond construction projects. Obviously, a lot of you were able to come out to Audubon Elementary. This is even an old photo now that all that canopy's been trimmed out. But I mean, we're ready to move in. We've got a few things we need to tidy up before the kids get there, but this project is substantially complete, and we've kind of moved in, and we did have to push the fire marshal's inspection to this Wednesday, but not because of us, but because of a delay with those folks. They weren't prepared to come out. So again, a lot of you saw these photos. You can see an interior classroom, a view of looking down into the classroom wing, and you can see the learning stairs there. This is a oversized corridor within the classroom wing. Shot of the cafeteria and the library. So I'll move on to the intermediate school. We are in pretty good shape there. I mean, we're at a point where we're starting to do finishes. We have permanent power. We have the air turned on. So we're painting and putting in the flooring finishes and putting in casework. So the classroom wing is moving along. You can kind of see where we're at there. And again, this was taken about a week ago, so there may be paint on those surfaces by now. Here's a shot of the library. Again, a very similar design to Magnolia Intermediate School. Just a shot of the cafeteria with the floor tile installation ongoing. Here's the main entrance to Magnolia Junior High. Again, schedule-wise, let me just get back to the intermediate. The intermediate's probably on schedule to complete January, so it's well ahead of schedule. The junior high right now is on schedule for a May completion. It wouldn't surprise me if that improves as well. So you can see a shot of the main entrance, classrooms, just sort of, you've seen this picture many times. It's just sort of staggered behind the other two projects, but they are starting to install sheetrock now. A shot of the cafeteria stage where we enjoyed a luncheon just the other week. Main corridor. And again, this has, they have begun hanging sheetrock in these areas. Just a shot of the auxiliary gym where we're at with that. So I'll give you a chance now to look at some of the stuff that we've been working on this summer and some of the projects that we kicked off, as well as some of the summer work. This is the new CTE addition at Magnolia West High School. This will house an HVAC program, and you can see that project's moving along. We're hoping to have this roofed and have the exterior skinned before the start of school. Therefore, all the work will be interior. Kind of keeps it away from the students. Here's a shot of the CTE building at Magnolia High School. This will house a health program. And this is, it's lagging a little behind. The building's supposed to deliver on August the 8th. So it won't take them but maybe a week to 10 days to get that building erected, and then hopefully we can have everything sort of contained there as well. Here's some of the improvements that we're making at the Ag Barn. These were things that we went through with Dr. Campbell and the Ag staff out at Mag High School and Mag West when we got recommendations from the things they wanted to see. So this is adding space for animal storage, or, where they can keep more animals. We added a sanitary waste system to this area as well, so that we can now capture we can keep animals there year-round and take care of them properly. This is another section that will enable them to set up pens temporarily when they have ag shows just outside of the building, but still undercover. And here's a shot of the concession stand, which our goal is to have this open for the September show. So it's moving along quickly. Here's a flooring project we did at Bear Branch Elementary. Bear Branch Elementary, we went in and we replaced all the classroom corridor flooring, all the classroom flooring, and the cafeteria flooring, as you can see here. That was a big project because much like we did Nickel Sawmill last summer, the VCT in that building was deteriorating due to moisture issues. And so we went, took all that in, we put in a moisture mitigation system in the classrooms, went to LVT flooring instead of VCT because that's kind of become our new standard. And so those two schools have been upgraded significantly. We also put in this is porcelain tile flooring at Magnolia Junior High, all throughout this area, the cafeteria, and the main corridor. I threw this in there. This is sort of a typical renovation that we're doing to all the campuses. This shows the new security window and how we've established a security vestibule at every campus. This includes the bullet-resistant glass, the security window, and then the buzz-in door system, so that folks visiting a campus are pretty much contained in that area until they've checked in. Something we've kind of been working on a long time, but we're hoping to wrap this up at all the schools by the end of next week.
Tim, is this more or less the same setup that we've just done at Audubon?
That's correct. It's a little different at some of the other campuses. If you go in, let's say one of our typical campuses like Magnolia Parkway or Bear Branch Elementary, we basically we glazed all of the glass on the inside to make it with the bullet resistant glazing, and then we added a security window where there was previously just a fixed window. So that looks a little bit different if you visit one of those campuses. And then what we did is we took out the old reception desk. We created a new reception desk adjacent to that window. We made those main doors that go into the reception area buzz-in doors. So while it doesn't look quite like this, I mean, it serves the same purpose. But yes, this is a similar setup that you'll see at the intermediate schools as well as our new schools. We're overlaying the roof at Willie Williams classroom corridor. A lot of you folks may have seen that action going on. That metal roof had begun to deteriorate and just had numerous pinholes throughout. And we decided that this would be the best overall approach to this roof. It's expeditious. It was a little cheaper than a full roof replacement, but it comes with a 20-year warranty. We feel pretty good about this product. That's it. Any questions?
When we toured Audubon last week, a couple of the big things that you had on your punch list were the flooring in the gym. They were getting that done, and then you were reworking the stairs in the cafeteria. How did those go?
So the gym flooring is now down. The only thing that's left to do is stripe it. So it's moving along very well. The wood flooring, we actually met with the flooring contractor today to discuss a way that we could overlay that in lieu of tearing it all out and still accomplish what we need to do. So we've worked out a plan, and we're waiting on the materials, but I don't have a timeline for it. I feel confident that we'll get it in before the start of school, now that we've established exactly how we're going to fix that problem. But yeah, it still looks pretty ugly.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So Tim, my apologies.
Oh, no problem.
I do have a question, though. When you think about the new schools, the three campuses that we're putting in, are there anything that comes to your mind that's above and better or different, unique, that's different than the two intermediates we just put in? In other words, Were you able to make some even upgrades from the last time we built new schools that stick out to you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the biggest changes we made at the intermediate is we made the classrooms a slightly larger, okay? We also added a sink to every classroom. We doubled the number of staff restrooms. We added additional offices. And probably the biggest thing is with some input from our fine arts director, we added a choir room. So there's a music room for the fifth graders and a choir room for the sixth graders. I think we made some other significant improvements in the fine arts. We also enlarged significantly the size of the gymnasium. And so we put up a divider curtain so that you could have fifth and sixth graders separated during PE. So,
That's
yeah,
cool.
quite a bit of change.
That's cool. That's awesome. Of course, now the question's going to be, how can we do that everywhere else, right?
Well, some of the comments that we received the other night with the tour was that we seem to have taken the best of everything. Well, I would hope that that's what we're doing. Absolutely, we take the successes and roll it into the next plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go to the consent agenda. This portion of the agenda consists of items to be routine A through H, and to be enacted with one motion unless separate discussion is requested by anybody. Does anybody request discussion or questions? Everybody good? All right. If there aren't any questions, we need a motion that we approve consent agenda items A through H. Motion by Dasha, seconded by Sonia. All right, all in favor? That motion passes. Thank you. I'm looking in the wrong place. Come join us, Dr. King. And what he's about to do is for review only. We don't approve anything out of what he does. Carry on.
Well, good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. Yes, so this is the TASB policy update 123. So just quick reminders, the update has legal and local policies in it. We don't vote on the legal policies. We just review and discuss when needed, but the local policies we do. As Mr. Blizzard said, there is no vote tonight on those policies, just a review. You'll see in the packet you had and in the cover sheet, there are 13 local policies in the policy update. Some of those, the update is a change in a phrase or word here or there. You may have noticed that in your packet. And you have this giant packet, and sometimes you see, well, they've just changed one word in the 12-page policy, so we won't go over those. But I did want to bring your attention to a few of them, and of course, we can answer any questions or about any of the other policies that you have questions about. So I'll start with the policies about board members. Hey, we're here tonight. I just wanted to point those out. There are two local policies. One has to deal with the Public Information Act, and the other one has to do with conflicts of interest. Obviously, I just wanted to point those out, make you aware of them. I trust that you've read them. If you ever had any questions or concerns about that, obviously we'd be here to answer those questions. But wanted to point those two things out. Those are new local policies to consider. The next policies I want to bring your attention to deal with safety and security. So CKC local and CKEC local. CKC really is just a small change. And it deals with dangerous or the policy says violent activity on a campus, but oftentimes we have a threat here or there that we have to investigate. And we'll work with, principals will work with Denise to contact parents when necessary to say, hey, whether the threat is credible or not, what we're doing to investigate it, how we're keeping the children safe during that time. It also deals with what they would consider violent activity between two students or a group of students. Thankfully, our student body is fairly well behaved. It's not often that the superintendent has to contact a parent about an altercation that you would consider violent between students. However, if that happened, we already have a process in place, and we've had to use it just a couple of times over the last couple of years where the superintendent would have been Dr. Stevens and now would be Dr. Bullock, would notify those parents of that activity. And so we have a process in place for that. This policy just really puts it in the policy to say that we have to have one, and that's something that we've been doing. Okay. The other one deals with our SROs. So we've had policy in place before regarding SROs. This one just takes it a little further and really fleshes out their responsibilities and duties a little bit more than policies have in the past. One defines their jurisdiction. So any school building, any property that's rented, leased, under district control, obviously that would be our campuses and other buildings like this, they have jurisdiction over. And so, and it also in the policy says that we can have multiple memorandums of understanding with different organizations or law enforcement. Right now, our memorandum of understanding is with the constable's office. We do not foresee going out to other agencies or anything like that. We're very happy with the constable's office and the SROs that we get from them. Had a good relationship with them for a long time, see that continuing. But this policy does allow for us to have relationships with other organizations if necessary. What this policy really does is talks about their duties. I won't read all of them. Really, it shouldn't be a surprise. It says that our officers can arrest people if they have to. They're going to keep anyone in the building safe. So when a parent comes in the building, the SRO is there to protect them just as much as they're to protect the student if necessary. It says that they can, investigate violations of district policy. It says they can carry a firearm, all things we already know. So really no surprises there, but it does really outline what it is SROs do for us. So again, very happy with them. Glad that they're on our campuses. I'm going to skip into another policy that deals more with instructional resources. So in the past, we've had a policy called EF, and there's been a legal and a local in that. And that has really given us guidance on instructional resources. So what's happening now is really EF altogether will be removed, deleted, and then replaced with two separate policies, EFA and EFB. And really, the gist behind this, and the way I read it, is instructional resources under the old EF code dealt with classroom materials and library materials, and now they've separated policies to address instructional materials and library materials separately. So EFA deals with instructional materials and resources, and those are the kind of materials that are textbooks, supplements, and anything that we use to address the TEKS in a subject specifically. And so that policy gives us guidance on how to select those materials, how to consider them, and how to reconsider them if necessary. EFA really looks a lot like EF. EFB talks about library materials. And library materials have a broader purpose than our instructional materials. If you're in the policy, you'll see that it says things like enrich and support the teach you would think library materials would do, so a much more broad purpose. But this policy does give us guidance on how those materials should be selected, how they should be considered, and how they should be reconsidered if and when necessary. That really does it for the policy update on my end, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. All right, so like Mr. Blizzard says, it's only for review, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lots of light reading, right? Okay. Now it's time to appoint the delegate and alternate to TASB, a convention that's in September, the last weekend in September in San Antonio. Last year's delegate was Stacia, and Jay was the alternate. And so only one person has to attend, obviously. However, if both the delegate and the alternate want to both attend, they're welcome to do so. And our board's participation in the delegate assembly ensures our voice is heard. And so we need volunteers again, like we did this time last year, So do we have a volunteer for a delegate? Stacy is volunteering to do it again. That's great. Everybody good? And then we need an alternate. Okay, Dasha? All right. So Stacy will be our delegate, Dasha the alternate. Everybody good with this? All right. Okay, we need a motion that we select Stacy as delegate and Dasha as alternate to serve on the 2024 TASB Delegate Assembly scheduled for Saturday, September 28th in San Antonio. Motion by Sonia, seconded by Jay. All in favor? That motion passes. Thank you very much. So Dr. Morris, you're back, I think.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So as the board is aware, for the past however many years, we've taken advantage of bond refundings when the market dictated the opportunity to do so. We've also been aggressive with bond defeasance or early payoff to save our taxpayers' dollars. This year, we have a relatively small amount available, but some money available nonetheless. So tonight, what we're asking the board to approve is a resolution that would allow us to move forward with a defeasance of the 2016 series of approximately $2 million. And in speaking with our financial advisor today, he anticipates that that will generate, based on a 4% coupon, a savings of about $1 million, approximately $1 million in interest. So what we have here, guys, is just a reminder of some of the things that we've done over the past 15 years with bond refundings or refinancing, however you want to pronounce it, and also paying off debt early. You know, when we have revenue available based on what we generate locally and from the state of Texas, after we've met our current year principal and interest requirements, we always pay off debt early when we have the opportunity. This year, it's not as large as it's been in years past, primarily because of how aggressive we were with paying off principal early on our 2022 bond, okay? So again, what I'm asking for approval is for the board to allow us to put a parameter of a minimum of $2 million to go pay off some debt early. Any questions on that?
You say minimum, what's the high end?
Well, based on my revenue estimate, it'll be right there at 2 million. I mean, if we were to exceed that, any more of that, it would ultimately be dipping into INS fund balance, which is fine because it can only be used to pay for debt. But based on my estimate, it'll be right at 2 million.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I think it would almost make more sense to put it as a maximum, but the language says minimum, so, yes, sir.
No questions, everybody's good? That, not to go in the weeds here, but that Money Matters thing's fantastic. And then also, I think we ought to, if we are going to consider, which it seems like we're headed toward this TRE, not that this relates necessarily for our motive for it, but it shows responsible budgeting and financial management of the district, and we ought to highlight this and other things, including what's in the Money Matters, you know,
Could
over
not
and
agree.
over and over again for the rest of the year.
Could not agree more, Mr. Blizzard.
I guess just for the record, I think people don't understand in general that we have $2 million that we're paying off instead of using for teachers' salaries or for other things. Could you just give a brief
Yes, sir.
synopsis of why that can't happen?
And absolutely, and of course, we get that a lot with bond proceeds as well. You know, they know that we passed a bond, they see the new buildings coming up, but there are two pots of money. You know, we have the general operating fund and our debt service fund. Two different budgets, two different pots of money, two different portions of the tax rate, I think is the most important thing. So when we go to our voters for approval, it gives the district the authority to levy a tax on the INS side to pay for debt, to pay for voter-approved bonded indebtedness. And by law, that money, this $2 million, can only be spent on bonded indebtedness. cannot be spent on salaries. And the same goes for our bond proceeds. You know, we have the approval from the voters, we receive the revenues from the bond, and it can only be spent on those things that were approved in the bond. Cannot be used. There is some flexibility with using it for some salaries for a few years for those that are directly involved with bonds, but generally speaking, it can't be spent on salaries and things of that nature. So it's a good point, Jay. Same goes for food service as well, but there's a lot of examples, and unfortunately, you know, it's the M&O funds that, as a general rule, is what we have available for teacher raises and things of that nature. So, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so now we need a motion to approve to adopt a resolution providing for the defeasance and redemption of certain currently outstanding district obligations. Motion by Jordan, seconded by Stacia. All in favor? That motion passes. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please carry on.
All righty. As part of the Public Funds Investment Act and board policy, we are required yearly for the board to review our local investment policy and strategy for our investments. I included in your packet, hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. It's sort of boring, but at the end of the day, we're not recommending any changes tonight. The investment advisors are set with myself and Ms. Weatherby, and our investment approach is not changing. You know, we're going to focus on safety, liquidity, and diversity. We did change a few things a few years ago with lengthening the maximum maturity of investments. We increased it from 12 months to 36 months. And then, of course, when Ms. Weatherby came on, we added her as an investment advisor. But investments are performing well. They, generally speaking, you know, the pools follow the federal funds rates, and we're receiving close to 6% now on the district's investments. So not recommending any changes tonight, but we do have to sort of check that box for Public Funds Investment Act purposes. Be happy to answer any questions about our investments as well.
Everybody good? Okay, we need a motion to approve, adopt a resolution, motion to approve the resolution of investment policy and investment strategies for Magnolia Independent School District. Motion by Sonia, seconded by Jay. All in favor? That motion passes. Thank you, and I think you got
One more,
a
yes,
little
sir.
bit, that's right.
So if you recall, when we were talking about the different pennies in the budget update, we talked about the copper pennies being subject to recapture. So for the third year in a row, we've been notified from TEA that we are subject to recapture or otherwise generate more revenue than the state says that we can at that level of funding. And while we do not anticipate accessing those pennies, they do not certify the tax rates until February, as many districts will be going out for TREs and things of that nature. So the reality is the state doesn't know that we're not going to access those pennies. So we have to go through the process of selecting a recapture approach, if you will, for sending money back to the state that we will not have to send back to the state, if that makes sense.
That's for if we had a tax revenue increase under the copper penny?
Yes, sir. So that's exactly what this is. And remember, when I talked about it, we would come into play here. So this is the state of Texas notifying us of what we already know locally, that we are subject to recapture at that level.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. Or, I guess, more presently, excess local revenue is what they're calling it now. So anyhow, it's our recommendation to approve the Chapter 48 reduction and delegating the contractual authority to the superintendent to sign a contract, which we did last year as well, but we have to do it every year, which basically means were we accessing those copper pennies and subject to recapture, they would simply reduce our FSP funding instead of us having to pay them back. So, but again, it's not going to come into play.
Everybody good? Okay. We need a motion that we approve the agreement for the purchase of attendance credits. Option 3, netting Chapter 48 funding, and to delegate contractual authority to the superintendent. Motion by Stacia, seconded by Jay. All in favor? That motion passes. One more question
Yes, sir.
about if we were to think of the TRE, it's airtight, there's absolutely no other way to do it except in November, correct?
That's correct. There was greater flexibility as of just a handful of years ago, and they've tightened the parameters, required additional efforts such as efficiency audits, postings, public hearings, and things of that nature, making it a little more challenging for us. So yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Petty, you're up next.
Good evening. As you know, each year the board votes to approve student code of conduct. And basically how this process works is we work with TASB Policy Services as well as district's legal counsel to put together a code of conduct. And based on the guidance we get from TASB and suggestions they make as well as recommendations we get from legal counsel, we put together the code of conduct. Generally, we get some revisions that need to be made every year. This year, TASB didn't really put anything out. We didn't get any recommendations from them except for one thing. They recommended we add one thing to our prohibited items list, which we did. But aside from that, there was no changes from the student code of conduct from last year to this year. So with that, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Dr. Petty, why don't you solve the mystery and tell us what the prohibited item
yeah.
is?
The prohibited item, non-tobacco nicotine products. So essentially what that is it's like synthetic nicotine. It's made in a lab, kind of has the same compounds as nicotine that comes from tobacco, but it's created in a lab.
Is that like a patch? Like, is a patch considered
I
a
think it could
non-tobacco
be. I think
nicotine?
also there are different dips, like tobacco dipping that you could, that's synthetic. But I'm not super familiar with it, but that's what I read.
And did the state in its wisdom provide any guidance on how we're supposed to
No, sir.
police that? Okay, thanks.
Got it.
We have to make a point to add that.
That's everything.
Everybody good? All right, we need to have a motion that we approve the 24-25 Student Code of Conduct as presented. Motion by Jordan, seconded by Stacia. All in favor? That motion passes too. Thank you, sir. So what else have we got? Any other loose ends?
No, sir.
I couldn't help but notice the list of the new hires. There were at least 2, and there are probably more, but I know of 2 that are returning Magnolia graduates, which is kind of cool. So maybe we can get that wheel spinning faster. I don't know.
It's a good thing.
That's pretty cool. All right. So the board will now recess to move into closed executive session for the purposes permitted by A, pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with attorney. B, pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.072, discussion of purchase, sale, exchange, or value of real property. And finally, C, pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074, personnel discussion and recommendations. All right, we need a motion to adjourn this meeting. Motion by Jordan, seconded by Stacia. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.